Okay, welcome to the Earthwork Pro product overview full-length video. This is Aaron Watts. I'll be guiding you through all the features and tools found within the Earthwork Pro plugin for version 3. This is designed to show you how to use the software as a plugin for the Plan Swift takeoff and estimating software. And you'll notice it will install up here on your ribbon bar within Plan Swift. And we'll begin by talking about what we'll show you. First of all, we're going to teach you how to digitize spot elevations using the spot elevations template here on the left. Then we'll talk about digitizing existing and proposed elevations using the tools here again on the templates, on the right. Next, we'll calculate cut and fill using the Earthwork Pro application here found on the ribbon bar. Then we'll talk about the trenching tools. You'll find those here again on the right inside of the templates tab. Then we'll get into adding trench piping and parts. We'll go ahead and show you how to use the sectional cut and fill tools. This would be for cross sections of roadways. Then we'll talk about putting in trucks for import or export of yardage. Then we'll also show you how to use layouts and reports, how to print the image with the cut and fill shown in red and blue. And then we'll also be talking about the option for choosing standard versus metric. So you have Earthwork Pro metric or just the Earthwork Pro. The difference again between the two is if you're working in metric, you want to use the templates on the the right hand side here for the metric templates. They look the same, but they're set up to calculate in metric, so you can choose there. So we'll get into that, and finally we'll cover some frequently asked questions in this video. So beginning with our spot elevations, the first thing you'll want to do is pull up your image, and you'll notice here I've got several spot elevations going on. So we're going to go ahead and begin by digitizing with an existing spot elevation for all the points that you see here on the image. Now what I'll do is begin clicking through, and then I'll cut through once we've done all of it. But to begin, we'll launch from the right hand side using the green Digitize button. You can also double click to launch. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck scaled here. You can leave it checked if you want. It's just an option. I'm going to go ahead and have this in my folder here for earthwork controls, or I could just leave it blank, which will be generally the default, and simply click OK. We'll go ahead now. You can see the digitizer is turned on, and it says to click the next point. So I can begin anywhere I want. I'm going to go ahead and start here in the left hand upper corner. So I'll click the point, and then you'll get this enter elevation window. If I need to enter my elevation, I'll go ahead and just type it in from the keyboard, 167.98. Click OK, and move on to the next point. And so you can just see it's a very simple process of setting the point and doing the elevation. Now, if you accidentally click in the middle of space and there's no point here, simply click cancel. The point will go away, and you can go ahead and do the next point in the proper location. So 167.73. We'll go ahead and continue on. Let me go ahead and get a few more points in here. Okay, coming back now, I've put in a lot more points. I paused the video for a moment, but coming back, let's see, I want to put in another point, and suppose I put in the point 169.36. Okay, so I'm off. It's the wrong number. You can see it puts this little note here. In order for me to actually fix this, I have to stop my digitizer, come back, select the point, double click to delete it, and then to put the point back, I need to come to the left hand side and use the green button here from the left hand side. This is actually called the continue with button. I'll just launch that, put the point back on, and then re-enter the value, 169.26. So now we have the correct value for that point. So now at this stage I have all of these existing points on my screen, and what I want to do is go ahead and triangulate these points. Now I could also put in proposed elevations, but this drawing actually I'll be going off of the proposed contours, and we'll be using contour lines to show you how to do that. But what I'm going to do now is simply come to my ribbon bar and click triangulate plot points, and you'll see it'll go through a series of points, triangulating between all of those points, and then it will fill in the average area in a triangle from the average of those spot elevations. Now all of those are digitized here on the left, so what I'll do now is just hide everything by clicking this little button here. And I want to digitize my building, which tells me it's a finished floor elevation of 172.3. So I'll come over here to my proposed, and these templates that you see here labeled 1 through 6, these have just pre-shaded values for proposed. You can reuse them as much as you like. I'll just start with the number 1, and what I'll do is actually enter the elevation for the proposed building floor, which is 172.30. Now that's the finished floor, so what I'm actually going to do is adjust this by 14 inches. I'm going to decrease the elevation by 14 inches because I'm going to have 4 inches of rock, or excuse me, 4 inches of concrete slab and 10 inches of rock. So I can go ahead and decrease that value and click OK. Now I still have to record the area, so my digitizer is turned on, so I'll go ahead and just draw in this area here, coming out to my points. And I've got my ortho turned on, so it's drawn in, helping me to draw straight lines. And if you make a mistake, you can hit backspace on your keyboard to undo that point. So we'll go ahead and draw in this proposed, right click, hit stop. And so we see, for some reason, the square footage isn't matching up on this drawing, but that's not a problem. This is just an example. So we'll go ahead and turn all the layers back on now, and you can see where my proposed overlaps everything here. Now there's a couple corners of the building that aren't actually encompassed inside of the existing. It will not calculate a volume if I don't have an overlap for my existing and my proposed. So what I can do, you can see there's another point here, 167.89. I'm going to go ahead and add a new point here. And to add another point, simply come over here and hit the continue with button. I'll go ahead and hit that point, 167.89. Click OK. And I need to find another point up here somewhere that correlates to where I can get to that corner. I don't really see one nearby. If you don't see one exactly nearby, you can take the next closest point. There's one way out here, 167.57, or I could take an average guess here. So I'm going to say 167.80 because I have 0.83 and 7.3, so we'll just go ahead and kind of split the difference there. And again, this is just user discretion. You're allowed to take your best average here, although, you know, just use wisdom when employing these averages. But I'll go ahead and turn off my digitizer. Now what I want to do is re-triangulate all of these points because I've added in a couple new points. So simply click triangulate plot points again. This will initiate a whole new set of triangulated points, and it will add in the 2 points that I just put down. And now you can see my entire proposed building area is covered in these brown triangles that I've calculated for my existing elevations. And so we've added in several triangles now based off of the 2 new points that I put in. So now we've covered putting in our spot elevations using existing spot elevation template here. We've also covered digitizing from a template here for contours. I'll go into that a little bit further after this. What we're going to do next is actually hit the calculating, cut and fill, and we do that launching the Earthwork Pro version 3 button here with the little bulldozer icon. So I'll go ahead and launch that, and you'll see the splash screen come up. It's actually opening my program and loading the image into the program here. So you can see here it's loaded up into the window here, and what I want to do actually is just maximize this out so we get a bigger image. I can zoom in and out by scrolling with my mouse wheel, and I can pan just simply right clicking or left clicking there. But what I really want to do once I get the image in, if I need to make any adjustments to my grid size, or if I want to change the shape of my cut and fill icon, I can do some of those things. For this video, I'm not going to go into too much detail other than to say all you really need to do at this point is come up and calculate the volume. So it's going to run some calculations, and you'll see it'll actually draw in points where the proposed building is. And everything that we see is drawn in blue, so that means we actually will have to fill this area to bring up to the level we need to put our building pad for that rock, and then basically placing the concrete after that. But what we don't know yet is how much fill. This just shows us a grid of where we're going to have to fill, but we want to now go see how much fill. So over here on the right hand side, it's actually ran some calculations just based off of the building slab. But what we're going to do is hit send to PlanSwift, and you'll see the calculations have been exported. I can keep this window open. Later on, I may want to print this image, so I'll just minimize this. And then coming back into PlanSwift, I'm going to be looking at the estimating tab, and we're going to go to the folder here for earthwork controls, and I can see, okay, I've got my proposed contour. Let me go ahead and look at some values here. Okay, and here's the number that I have for total yards of fill. I have 1,461 total yards of fill in that area for my building pad. Okay, this was the elevation of that building pad. If you recall, the building said it was 172.30, but we adjusted that by 14 inches, which gives us a calculated adjusted elevation of 171.13. I can also go to my reports, and what I want to do on reports is actually pull up the report that I'll probably print and either send to the client for my bid or out to my guys in the field. But basically the report is going to give me what I need to see here. So I have Earthwork Pro Summary for cubic yardage. There's my number here. I've got 1461.88 for a total yardage on my fill, and the same total yardage on my quantity. Now, you can actually add up across multiple pages in this when you start calculating out. What we're going to show you guys next is sort of where Earthwork Pro originally was in version 2. If you're familiar with version 2 of Earthwork Pro, this next segment will be very familiar to you. If Earthwork Pro is brand new to you, just look at what we're going to go over next closely, just so you can understand how we work out average elevations when doing contour takeoffs. So we'll talk about that here next. Okay, we're back. So what I did was I switched sheets. We're over here on a new image. This is actually just, again, a plan where we've got kind of a roadway. This particular drawing actually shows me proposed contours and existing contours on the same image. Okay, so you can see the dash line here, 632, 634. This next one will be 636. If you can see that, I'll magnify in there. It's not the greatest image. And then you have the solid lines here are my proposed contours. Now, something I kind of forgot to mention on my other drawing back here when we looked at this, what this would be considered, or what we call this for Earthwork Pro, this is our area of interest. Essentially, I don't have to do all of the points that are shown on the image. You know, there's a lot of other elevations and spot elevations I didn't touch, and that's only because I only needed to calculate where the building, what the building cutter fill was going to be. So I really just took into consideration, this is what we call the area of interest. So back on this other image, we're going to look at that. We're not going to do the whole drawing. We're just going to analyze a few points here, some of it for demonstration purposes, so that you can see what we call the area of interest. Okay, but we'll begin by digitizing our existing elevations. Now, the way this works when you're doing contours is you actually will launch from the right hand side the pre-shaded existing elevation, And what we're going to do is put in the average elevation between the two contours. So in this case, it's really easy. 632 and 634, the average elevation is 633. So we'll go ahead and launch my first pre-shaded number, which is number 1. Click the green button and simply enter the elevation 633, and that's all I have to do. Click OK, and I'm digitizing. Now, because I'm only going to be looking at the area here, that's kind of with this black dashed line, I really just have to start right along that line because that's going to be my area of interest. And what I want to do is turn off my ortho. Ortho will lock in my lines, so I don't really want to have that turned on. And again, I'm just going to trace out and follow my contours. If you make mistakes, you can simply hit backspace on the keyboard to undo. Now this goes up pretty far, maybe a lot further than I really want to take it, but we're going to go with the line as far as I can tell, tracing this out. And sometimes it gets a little tricky to follow these contour lines, so you have to kind of zoom in and out to catch everything. But what I'm doing again is following this all the way over to this dashed line again, because I'm going to come back down. Now actually I went a little too far, so what I'll do is hit backspace on the keyboard. The line I'm looking for is actually this one. And then I'm going to come back and cross over again once I hit this other 634. Now it's a little tricky to see, but if you can follow what I'm doing, hopefully this will line back up to the same starting point where I began with filling in this area for this contour. And it looks like we're right on the money. And I'll right click and hit stop. So if you can see this whole area, there's actually 39,000 square feet. And what we're saying is there's 39,000 square feet that on average, the elevation, if you were to stand anywhere on site, the average elevation is 633 feet. And we know because we're in between contour 632 and 634. So what I'm going to do is pause for a minute, fill in a few more of these existing ones, and then I'll come right back and show you how we'll do the proposed. Okay, so I'm back. I've done some of the areas here now. So we started with this one, which was 633. I've also done 635, 637, 639, and 641. So the next one you can see is 642 right here. Hopefully you guys can read that. And the next line, it doesn't actually show me, but we know just because of the way the contours are set up, that's 644. So I've actually done 5 of the pre-shaded colors. I'm going to go ahead and do the 6th color here. And the average elevation there is 643. So I'll go ahead and type that in, 643. Click OK. And again, one of the things you haven't seen yet is I have my snap turned on here. Snap at the very bottom of Plan Swift. What that does is gives me this red box. It allows me to digitize right up against my previous elevation without overlapping. And I can go ahead and run that through. Now, if you make a mistake and you click somewhere you didn't intend to, again, hit backspace on the keyboard to undo those points. And you can see I'm following along the line here. Now, because I've used all 6 of the pre-shaded browns, what I'm going to do is go back to the number 1 pre-shaded. You can use as many of these templates as you like. I just like using 6 different pre-shaded colors, and you can cycle through them. So the next number I need is going to be 645 because I'm between 644 and 646. So 645 will be my number. And we can see we're getting down to the end here. I'll this time work my way around, coming back, and you can see my snap hitting into this one here. And then for the final corner, I've got 647, so I'll use the number 2, type that value in, 647, click OK, and run this out. And done. Now we're done all the way to that corner. I could come back and finish all of the contours up here, but because this is just a demonstration video, we won't go ahead and do all of that right now. I may fill this in. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the proposed really quickly and show you how we start doing proposed. Now, if you're going to digitize proposed and you've already digitized existing, one of the things I might recommend is coming over here to your page, hitting the little button here with the digitizer icons. This will hide all of the layers that are there. You can turn everything on and off. So since I don't really want to see the existing, I'll hide those and turn those off. And then I'm going to go to my proposed now, which is a little easier to follow because the lines are darker. So we can see, for example, 640, 638, pretty clear lines, 642, of where I need to be with those proposed values. So we're going to start off in this area here of 642 and 640. So the average there is 641. So we'll go ahead and open the folder for proposed and collapse the existing, and I'll launch the first template here by clicking the green button and again entering the value 641. Now if you can see, there's a roadway here and then there's also lots off to the side. If there's a bigger change in elevation for the road because we're going to have base and asphalt and everything, what you'll have to do is digitize that separately and then adjust for it. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what I'm going to do is click right down the side of the road here, and I'm going to do the road in a separate section because I know I'm going to adjust for the road base and asphalt. And you see I'll come back around here to the road. I'm going to tap A for arc, and I can turn and do an arc through here. And then follow my line out along the road and come back down the road here. I can follow these lines. It's a little tricky. I think this is it right here. And I'm going to turn snap off because it's kind of getting in my way. So I can make that adjustment and do that road section just like that. Now again, that 641 would be the top of the asphalt. So I'm going to right click and go to the properties and open up and check the box here to show my elevation adjustments. So in this particular area, I know that for the dirt, I need to actually have this proposed elevation be, let's say, another 10 inches lower. So I'll go ahead and decrease that elevation by 10 inches in that area and click OK. Now, because there's still an area for 641 out through here, what I'm going to do is just launch another tool. And again, I'll use a different color of blue. Click the green button, and I'll still type 641. This time I'm not going to adjust the elevation at all, and I'll turn on my snap. And so you can still see I'm still applying this in the area for 641. You don't always have to use the arc if you don't want to. I don't always spend the time. It's not really that it takes a long time. It's just you have to try to match up those points later on, and it becomes a little tricky to do so. So now I've got to try to find, okay, where did they end this elevation? It's a little tricky to know exactly. I'm going to just come back and look at it like this, and then finish this out here at the end and stop. Okay, so I've got 641 in that area. Again, coming back, you see 642 here, so that probably will be either 642 or 643 depending on how that shakes out. So I'll go ahead and launch another proposed, set this up as 643 and click OK, and then run this out. Now if I have the same scenario where I've got to adjust, I may want to start this over and basically say, okay, 643 inside of the road, I'm going to still have to adjust this 10 inches. So what I've got to do is find out where that road ultimately sits and run this out. Now, this is my area of interest here, which is this dashed line. I didn't come any further with my existing, so I'm not going to come any further with my proposed. This is where we're basically doing our cut and fill in this area. So you can see I'll complete that shape in here. But now again, I've still got to do another piece of section through here, which will be 643. So I'll just pick the next color. And I don't want to forget to adjust it, so we can go back to that in a minute. But again, this will all be 643 through here. We'll come down and we'll just run this out. Now you see 638 up here. This actually looks like it kind of ends out right through this way. So, you know, with all the lines going on these images, it does take a bit to try to sort out everything. So I will say it's not always an easy task. If your snap is kind of getting in the way of things, you can turn that off. And you can turn it on and off by toggling it with the F3 button on the keyboard. And I had a little bit of an arc in here, so I can double click and add another point in. Right click on that point, make it an arc point, and make that fit just nice and snug. Okay, so as we continue to go through, I want to remember to go to the properties for this area and adjust it over the roadway by decreasing it 10 inches. So click OK, and there we go. So we've got all that going on. Now, obviously, I could spend a lot more time going through here with you guys on video. So what I'm going to do at this stage is come in, do a little more digitizing, and then we'll run the calculations in just a minute. Hopefully you guys get the concept of how doing the digitizing works. One other thing I'll say before I go through and digitize and get into the calculations, if you're ever working on like a retention pond or anything that has a subtracted area, you cannot subtract area in the conventional way where you actually put in a negative value. If you try to do that, Earthwork Pro will tell you that you've got subtracted sections and you need to fix that before you can proceed. So just another FYI about subtracted sections. You're not supposed to do that, and it won't work to have subtracted sections, so I'll delete that. If you do need to create a subtracted section or cut around something, let me show you an example of that. So notice here this 642, this diamond shape here. As an example, if I were working in an area where I needed to cut around that 642, there's a very simple way to do it. You can just kind of use a cupping method, as I call it. So let's say I want to put in a proposed elevation here. What I'll do is start out by creating basically a cup on this one side. And then I'll right click and make a new section, and I'll cup around the other side. Okay. And I'm not doing perfect diamond here, as you can see, but essentially there's no subtracted section. I have two shapes here that basically cup around this area here that is fully enclosed now by my digitized sections. So if you're going to have to subtract something, you can't use the subtract from section function here. You have to actually do kind of this cupping solution, and that's just another tidbit here on digitizing for existing and proposed. I'm going to go ahead and just box select that, hit delete on the keyboard, remove that out, and let me go ahead and pause really quickly, digitize a few more sections of proposed, and we'll get back and calculate here in just a minute. Okay, we're back. So you can see I've done some more digitizing here for proposed. Now a couple things I've left blank, a couple of sections I purposefully have left out. So you can see, for example, here I have 638 to 640, and I've already digitized over here this 639. I need the same one on this side. This 639 was adjusted by 10 inches, so it actually shows 638.17. But what you can do if you've already created a section, you can simply right click and hit new section if there's a similar section, and I'll go ahead and digitize that section over here. Again, you have to use arc if you're doing that. You don't have to use arc, but I'm just saying what you want to do is if you did do an arc, you want to close that area up with an arc. Now, so I have 639 there and 639 here, but again, you'll notice this is a different section. So same thing here, I have 637 and 637, but instead of using those same sections for the roadway, I'm going to go back and dip into my well here and grab a new section, which I will call 637. and then I'll hit the adjust elevations and decrease that like all the others by 10 inches and click OK, and then simply digitize in this area. Again, you can see my snap turned on there. It's helping me to click onto points that I've already set up. And just about done here. And then I'll right click and hit stop, and voila, we have that as, let's see what the number is, 636.170. You can also look in the bottom right hand window to see, did we do that the same across all the areas? So notice down here where you have that decrease elevation, 10 inches there, same thing, 10 inches, another one here, 10 inches, 10 inches here. Now if I click on these other areas, it doesn't even show that because I haven't yet checked that box. This is just sort of a way to actually look at the properties window just in a kind of a quick view. And actually it's called the inputs view over here on the right hand. So for whatever you have selected. So now that I have all of these areas done, I'm going to just show and hide everything, or actually hide and then show everything. So what we have is we have a few areas where I don't have existing and proposed overlapping. Up here I only have existing, over here I only have some proposed, but anywhere where we have these areas overlapping, we're going to be able to calculate those. So we're going to go back to our Earthwork Pro bulldozer button here. This will launch Earthwork Pro. We'll click that button to launch, and we'll go ahead and have the image loaded for us. And then again, simply this time hit calculate. Now by default, the size on the grid size is 0.25. What that is every quarter of a foot it calculates. You could calculate every foot or half a foot, and if you're in metric, it calculates every quarter of a meter, every half of a meter, or every meter. We did it for this so that we could actually expand into English and metric easier than before. So I'm just going to go ahead and calculate on every foot. It calculates a little faster here, and simply run that number and see what we get for our cut and fill. Now I could have maximized this screen as well. This time I chose to just leave it in a smaller view for the Earthwork Pro, but it's taken a minute here to calculate. Doesn't take too long. And we actually didn't see anything show up, and sometimes the reason that is if you're on a really large site, the grid may not show up very well using a circle. So I'm going to go to something more traditional, like a triangle graphic, and then rerun that calculation again. And this has to do with the size of the site and the graphics. So depending on what you're doing there, you may need to make some adjustments to the graphic options, as you can see here. So let's see what happens this time as we go through and calculate. All right, and we get a nice image here of where we're going to have cut, where we're going to have fill. So you can see everywhere again in blue is where we're going to need to fill. And everywhere we're looking at in red is where we're going to need to cut for this image. So now let's go take a peek at our calculations once we send them to PlanSwift. So we'll again hit send to PlanSwift. The calculations were exported. I'll just minimize this, go to my estimating tab, and we can see this is the numbers that we're looking at. 1,700 yards of cut and 6,200 yards of fill. Now if I wanted to go and look at the overall totals, I can go back to my report, and we can see now the 1461 in addition to the other values. So we actually had 6214 and 1461 plus the 1755. So these are our total numbers here broken down by page. So we had existing and proposed contours A, that was the page name, and then spot elevation plan A. But these are added together here on this report so I can see my total values in the report itself. Alrighty, so that's the first sections here on digitizing, either existing and proposed or using spot elevations or contours, and then calculating. For the sake of time, we better move on to some of the other tools and features. So next up, we're going to talk about trenching tools and adding in pipe with those trenches. We'll go ahead and move on to that. Okay, so we're going to go over to this plan here called Demo Plan 1. And we see another road here. This time, instead of actually doing cut and fill, we're going to be looking at running a trench right down the center of the road if we've got to do some repairs or what have you. What I'm going to do is just launch this folder here on the left, trenching tools with the length displayed. And I'm just going to grab my basic tool here for a regular trench. Now, the difference between this trench and this trench, the one with the letter T, this trench shows you the yardage. Well, this one shows you the cubic yardage. This one shows you your backfill in tons. So you have some options to see different calculated values based on what tool you select. Also, these ones will show you the length of the trench displayed on the left. Over here, you could also show the volume of the trench. So there's actually 4 different tools. Each one has a slightly different function, so it's up to you to pick kind of which one you like to use the most to either calculate in yardage or tons, or to calculate and show the length or the volume. So I'm going to do the length displayed with backfill calculated in yardage, and I'll launch that again by clicking the green button, and you'll see it'll launch my trenching tool. And you've got a pretty sophisticated window here of some things going on. So what we're going to start with is, what's the width of the trench? Well, let's just make it simple. We'll say it's 4 feet wide. What's the depth of the trench? The depth will be also really basic. We're just going to do a 3-foot trench. And then what's the pipe diameter here? Well, if we're including pipe, we need to know that. If you're not including pipe, you don't even have to put anything in. You can check this box, and it won't even actually matter what you have here for pipe. But if I check the box and say, okay, I want to have pipe, you'll notice the image actually shows pipe inside the trench. And we're going to just put in a standard 24-inch pipe. Then you can also change the slope of the trench. So in a roadway, I'm going to have a vertical trench, but in other applications, you may want to actually have different slope styles for your trench, depending on where you're at and what the soil type is. You can actually slope out your trench. The other option is you could do a trench with a bench in it as well. We're going to keep it really simple and just do the basic vertical trench. Another thing I want to look at is if I'm actually going to have bedding under the trench and if I'm going to have a pipe zone backfill. So you'll notice this image here, the second image below. If I check the box for calculate bedding under the pipe, it'll actually add a layer of bedding to my calculations. And if I wanted to do a pipe zone backfill, it will add a layer of pipe zone backfill to my calculation. So I'll have actually 3 separate calculations for native backfill, for pipe zone backfill, and for bedding under the pipe. But I have to specify what the depth is. So let's say for the bedding, I'm going to put 6 inches of bedding. And for my pipe zone, I'm going to basically cover in 2 inches above the pipe. So if my pipe's 24 inches in diameter, I'm going to go ahead and put in 26 inches of pipe zone backfill. So now we're going to go ahead and click OK, and all we actually have to do is digitize the length of the trench. Well, I'll start here right at the match line for sheet 3, or for sheet 5 rather, and just digitize out here all the way to the other end for the match line of sheet, whichever that is. Doesn't matter. But for this example, I'll go ahead and digitize that out. Now, if I was running my trench in different directions, I could run that all the way out and continue to go, but I'm just going to back that out, right click and hit stop, and I have the full length of the trench is 499.5 feet, and you can see that same 499.5 feet over here. Now, what's really slick about the trench is over on the right, you can see the calculated volumes here. So I have a total excavated volume of 222 cubic yards. The pipe itself is displacing 58 yards itself. My native backfill is 24 yards. The backfill around the pipe in the pipe zone is 102. And then I have 37 yards of bedding. Now, if you take these 4 numbers, 58, 24, 102, 37, add those all up, you're going to get exactly the same excavated volume. So really, you have a volume of what the trench is, and then you have a volume of everything going back into the trench, automatically calculated for you. Now let's say I want to actually add pipe into that trench and just get a length of pipe there. You also have tools to do that. So I'm going to go to my trenching parts, my trenching pipe. And let's say that that 24-inch pipe is, and honestly guys, I am not a really big trenching guy, so I don't know what your standard 24-inch pipe is. Maybe it's a stormwater pipe, okay? You simply drag and drop these right onto the line, and you can put in the cost of markup, but really at that point, you can see over here it puts in the 499.5 linear feet of pipe, because we know that's exactly the length of the trench. What's really slick about that, if I go and look at my estimating for all of this that I've been adding, here's the trench that we just ran, and what I want to do is just show you here on my trenching layout that this also picks up the diameter of that pipe. So remember, we told on our form here the pipe was 24 inches. Now check this out. If I adjust this 24 inches and let's say we're doing 18 inches on the pipe diameter, all of these numbers will recalculate, and the description here for the pipe will also update as well. So we'll click OK, and you can now see I have 18 inches pipe there, but everything here adjusted as well. Now the bedding stayed the same because that didn't matter, but the pipe zone backfill increased, the native backfill adjusted, and the pipe displaced volume decreased because I'm using a smaller diameter pipe. So everything is dynamic and automatically calculates for you when using the trenching tool. Now let's suppose that the elevation for my trench changes, so I don't have one standard depth, which in this example we said that the depth was 3 feet. Another option you have here is go to this where you say depth options, and if you're going to calculate a trench depth, you can actually set your different end top and bottom elevations and your start top and bottom elevations, but you do have to check this box to be able to input those. By checking that box, what it does in the trenching tool is takes away the depth option here. So it's really an either or. You can either put in a static trench depth, this again is 3 feet all the way, or I can do an average depth. And so we'd put in a value, let's say that the start of the trench was at elevation 88.5, and then that's going to bottom out another 3 feet, so this would be 85.5. Oops. Let's get this in here right. I want to make that there. And then at the end, it's a little shallower, so we may be at, let's say, 89 feet, but it might not go quite 3 feet, so it might be 86.5. Okay, so now that is a new calculated value for the trench, and that depth on average, you can see when I hover over it, we knew it was 4 feet wide. The average depth is 2.75 feet instead of 3 full feet on average. And again, that's just because we're using the option here and my depth options to actually calculate the average depth. Let's say this was 6.3, okay? If we get that average now, you're looking at an average of 2.85. It's simply a really simple calculator that's built right in so that you don't have to think about it on your own. All right, so that's the trenching tool. Another really cool thing that we have in this version 3 is a cross-sectional cut and fill option for using station numbers. So I'm going to show that here next. Okay, coming back to my drawing here, on a new plan called cross-section example. So you may have come across this before, where you have a cross-section of a road. It shows you where you're going to be cutting, where you're going to fill, and then it shows you the station distance. So to launch my template, I'm going to go to my right-hand column here, open the folder for sectional cut and fill tools, and we're going to launch the one here for cut, which is red. Simply click the green button, set the station distance as 50 feet, click OK, and we'll digitize this area out. Fix that. You can again hit backspace if you ever make mistakes, just like I did just then. And if you need to add in a point, you can double click, add a point there. So my cross-sectional area here is 91 square feet at 50 yards of length. So we get 169.4 cubic yards, and that shows me a negative value there because it's cut. If I want to do the fill, which is this little triangle here, this wedge here, I'll go ahead and launch that, put in the same station distance of 50 feet, click OK, and we'll digitize this wedge out right here, just like that. And so there's 7.64 square feet in that cross section times the 50 feet we're extruding. And we're going to go ahead and get 14.2 positive yardages. In this case, Earthwork Pro treats fill as positive. So we get that number out there at 14.2. And I made a few other adjustments here. But we can continue going through doing cut and fill. Now, if I have the same station distance on any of these, I can hit and continue with the section. If I have a different station distance, what you want to do is launch a new cut and fill tool each time you'll have that. And then when you get to the end of your report, we can go in and look at our report, and we can see our total cut and fill value in one of our reports here. Okay. Also, if we go to my estimating, we can look at our numbers here, and we're going to see that 172 and that 14.5. Now, let's suppose that I want to add some trucks in for all of the cut and fill that I have going on. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to look at is this column here for cut total and for fill total. I've got about 3,600 yards and 1,500 yards here that we're going to have to account for. So with a truck, it's really pretty simple. You can say, okay, I need to export so much and then import so much depending on if it's cut or fill. So you have these different trucks. I'm going to just take this export by load, and you just drag it onto a blank part of the estimating grid. Okay, you don't want to add it to anything specific, but what you do is just manually enter the quantity that you need, 3683.64. This isn't linked to anything, so you want to do this at the end of all your other calculations. And basically, okay, I'm going to have 10 cubic yards per load. I can put in my price, let's say it's $100 a load, and click OK. So this is going to generate a value of 368 loads at $100 a load is 36,000 bucks. Now that number may be way off, whatever, but ultimately it's based off of this 3683 that I've got to cut. So that's going to be export. Now for my import, I'll take my other truck and just simply drag and drop that. And we know the value there is 15,366 at 10 yards a load. And again, we could adjust that number and we'll say that the same price there. So we're going to have 1,500 loads, and so we've got a huge number there for our import-export value. Now, if this 10 yards is completely unrealistic, let's say each truck actually holds 30 yards or 40 yards, whatever number it is, I can simply go back to the properties, adjust that value, and it's going to recalculate out the total number of loads. So here I've got 122 and now 512 loads there. And those show up if you go to your trucks report or estimating layout. You can also see how many loads you have over here as import or export in these columns. So one of the things we've done in Earthwork Pro 3 is we've created a lot of layouts and reports, which I told you I'd show you. If you go up here, your first one is your Earthwork Pro default. You can also go in and adjust elevations. Remember, we adjusted some of these elevations here 10 inches, so you can actually see those numbers here. You can adjust different percentages when you go in after you've made your calculations. Let's say that I want to adjust everything by 10%. I can actually modify this folder value here, 10%, and all of these values will adjust as well based on an inheritance that we've built in. This is the original Earthwork Pro layout if you're used to using that. You can look at Earthwork Pro adjusting your elevations in meters. Now this is if you're running metric stuff. And then your import and export trucks. You have one here for your trenching values. So there's a lot going on. And some of these things you may or may not necessarily need to use. But again, we've built all this in so that it's there. If you want to use it, you don't have to recreate it. This is pretty cool too. There's certain things that you'll have in your reports. So for example, let's go to my trenching tool. I may not want to really show my excavated volume, and I may not need to show the pipe displaced volume because I'm not going to charge anything for that. What I really need to look at is the bedding and the native backfill and the pipe zone backfill and the pipe itself. And I may want to go price those things, so I can come back here and do that. Let me go into my trenching layout. So again, my native backfill, my cost on that is really nothing, so we're not going to worry about that. But the pipe zone backfill, I've got to pay for that, and that might be so much a yard, so let's say 25 bucks there. And then my bedding, it may be a little more expensive, 30 bucks there. And then the pipe, I've got to pay per linear foot on that, so let's say it's 12 bucks a linear foot there. Okay, so I want to really maybe only show these 3 items on the report. Well, right now, if I go to the report, I'm seeing again the excavated volume, the pipe displaced volume, and so forth. What's really slick about this, back in the estimating, I can go to this show on report and simply uncheck boxes next to items that I don't need or want to see on any given report. This is kind of an option we built in. So if I uncheck those and go back to the report, now I'm only going to see the bedding, the PVC, and the pipe zone backfill on my trenching summary. So another really cool thing we've done for the layouts and reports. Now, another thing you can do here is once you've got this, simply just print that, go into your print. The other cool thing you can do is go back and print like your drawing here for guys out in the field so they can see where you're going to have cut and where you're going to have fill. This is printed out of simply just a different application here with the plugin. This is just the application we use in the plugin, so it looks a little different than PlanSwift, but you'll get a print preview here. Let me just pull that over, and you can print that. Another option that you have is when you go to print, you can simply export this as a PDF, which is really kind of slick. So you can export that as a PDF. I believe you can also add in some notes and headers and footers there. You may want to play around with that when you get into it, but gives you some pretty cool options there for printing. Now, wrapping this up, we're about to hit an hour mark here. Pretty soon we'll be at close to an hour. One of the things I wanted to talk about was choosing standard or metric in this Earthwork Pro. We're also going to show you really quick this working space button as well before I forget. But choosing standard or metric. So, if you're in a different country other than the United States, which is where I'm based, you're using probably the metric system. Unfortunately, the United States is still on the imperial or standard system, using feet and inches, a little more complicated than the decimal system with metric, but it is what it is. So we've had to build in a whole separate metric and standard versions. When you download the plugin, everything comes loaded standard metric. But one of the things you can do if you don't want to use anything standard, or if you are worried about getting confused if you're using the right tab or not, one of the things you can do is simply right-click on the standard tab. Again, this is if you're a metric user. Simply right-click here and say hide that tab. And boom, it's gone. It's disappeared, really. It's only hidden, though. You can recover that tab using the drop down here, and you can see Earthwork Pro version 3 is right here. It's just simply hidden. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff hidden, actually, that you can't see. So going back to my home, though, This drop-down menu will only show you tabs that are visible and not hidden. So now I really don't have any excuse for accidentally selecting the standard Earthwork Pro tab, because I can only select the Earthwork Pro metric because it's the only one I have available. So that's part of choosing the standard or metric option. And if you're a standard user, you can also hide the metric version just the same way we did hiding the standard version for the metric users. Everything in here, again, if you're looking at the trenching tools on metric, these will be calculated out, and I've put a little M here for metric, and then metric tons. Okay, so I've done a few things here to help with that, and hopefully that'll make sense. If you're looking at, for example, the properties here on your pipe, the pipe is measured out, everything in the pipe diameter is in centimeters. Same thing on your trenching tool. If you launch your trenching tool, let me just show you this screen. Everything is going to be meters or centimeters. So you have things, again, all set up in metric for you, and it's all designated metric for you. And we have to do it that way in PlanSwift. That's just the way it works. So again, choosing standard or metric, there's a few little setup things that you kind of need to do, but we've made it as easy as we possibly feel it can be to get you set up and going. The other thing I wanted to show you, going back to this image here, looking at my proposed building, let me go into that here. A customer requested, and I've had a few people ask, if I'm excavating this building, I have to draw in the building shape, but if I need to actually have workspace for my crew or my excavators or people to actually get in where they're going to place footings and slabs and whatnot, I may want to expand that building shape out. Well, we built this really cool button called Working Space. I simply select the area I want, click Working Space, and add my workspace value. Let's say I want to add in 5 feet to work in. I simply enter 5, click OK, and that building space will expand out all the way around by 5 feet total. So that working space button is just a really simple button, but has a really cool functionality. It allows you, again, to select a specific area and add working space in that area that you'll need. So to wrap up, let me just overview a few other things. If you're going down the list here on the right-hand side, we have some additional trenching parts. You've got parts in here for labor. We talked about having pipe. If there's a specific kind of pipe that you don't see on my list, simply use this particular one. You can go to the properties and just type in your own name, create the pipe there, and you could copy and paste that or duplicate it. If you simply use the duplicate button up here, you can duplicate that, create your own, and you could type in your own pipe. Let's say I want to call this silly pipe, just to be silly. I can add in a pipe and keep it there on my list. Okay, if I don't need that anymore, I could delete that out. Going back into my templates, and you can see under my trenching pipe, there it is. I don't need that, so we'll delete that out. But I have that template here, so you can create your own. For trucks, we talked a little bit about that. Trenching parts and your trenching tools. I think we've covered just about everything. There is random color for existing and proposed contours. I generally, myself, prefer to only use the pre-shaded ones. I like the pre-shaded browns and blues. Some of our customers like to just generate random colors. It's up to you. And then we talked about those spot elevations as well. One other thing that's also really important is coming into your estimating. Every time you generate calculations, there's a folder here, okay? Now, I've just adjusted the area on this building, and if we go show all of my existing and proposed contours, you can see they still overlap here. So what I'm going to do is actually close the Earthwork Pro, relaunch it with this image, okay? and I want to recalculate what the total cut or fill, actually it's going to be fill, for this building will be now that I've added 5 feet of working space. So when I click calculate, again it's going to run through and do all the calculations that I want to see. Well, when I hit send to PlanSwift, if I don't want to overwrite my other set of calculations, meaning the calculations that I had done previously when I did not have the 5 feet of working space. This is very important. Up here, this is the folder that it's going to send to PlanSwift. So if I wanted to say, well, I want to compare these two, I need to append the name with a value like, let's say, -2. Okay, so really click in this box and you've got to either adjust the name or change the name of the folder, or otherwise PlanSwift will automatically overwrite the folder of the previous calculations that I already had. So now that I've said spot elevation plan A-2, I'll send that to PlanSwift, and we'll go look at the calculations here in the estimating, and you should see these are my original numbers right here for that 171.13, 1461, if you remember. But now I have this other folder here, -2, and it's actually a bigger number, which is no surprise because I've added in more area for that working space, and I have 1821.24. But now, because I didn't delete this folder by sending calculations over it, I put that -2 in there. I can compare the two calculations versus having them be overwritten, if I were to not change the name of the folder. And that's just something to be aware of in version 3. It's a little different than the way we did it in Earthwork Pro version 2. So a few things there, frequently asked questions, that sort of thing. And then also we'll have a written guide that we're going to be putting out that you can refer to. This video is, again, designed to be about as comprehensive as we can get it. We're going to break things down into smaller chunks as well for you guys, but hopefully this covers what you guys need to see to really get started with this Earthwork Pro plugin and start utilizing the software here completely. And again, if you have questions, you can contact our PlanSwift plugins team, plugins@planswift.com, or dialing our main number, which is 1-888-752-6794, extension 5 for plugins. My name is Aaron Watts, and I appreciate your time watching this video and hope you can utilize this plugin to get your earthwork calculations, your trenching calculations all set up and done. Thanks.